morning, Marilyn. Marilyn Winter, formerly known as Sister
Marlene.
And the Winters come from the Winterland, don't they?
Well, they come from the Upper Peninsula. Yes, right. Yes.
It gets cold up there before it gets cold here.
Yes, usually, right.
I wonder if the leaves are changing about now.
I presume they are, yes, because we're even changing down here. I saw a few beautiful ones on my way over.
Well, Marilyn, you are the first sister we're interviewing for a sister story, beginning our third year of interviews. So thank you for saying yes.
Oh, you're welcome.
I
It's good to be here.
really appreciate that. And I'd like to take this opportunity also to thank you for your ministry here on campus when you were the director of worship. That really meant a great deal. And it's nice to have you as a volunteer now every once in a while. I see you doing that. You live off campus, correct?
I do. I live downtown.
Mm-hmm. And are there any other sisters around you?
There are 4 of us in the apartment building, and we get together every week. Whoever's there, we meet on Wednesday evenings. So, and there's a very good relationship. It's a small apartment complex. We know the people who are in the other apartments, and we have community get-togethers with the others and ourselves.
You look after one another.
Right.
Yes. Were you there when Sister Barb
Yes.
died?
Yes. I went down, and I think I was the first one in the door, but Mary Jane had called. Right, yeah.
Well, that's a gift to live among our sisters, isn't it?
Yes, it was great having them all there.
Going back to the Upper Peninsula, did you have a large family, many siblings?
Well, yes, we had 6 siblings. I was the oldest of the 6 by 10 minutes. And we lived in a little fishing village in the Upper Peninsula. Besides being the Upper Peninsula, I think we need to understand that we also had our own peninsula. It was called the Garden Peninsula. It came off, you know how they usually talk about Michigan being the mitten, and then the top part, if you come across here from the Mackinac Bridge, there are 3 peninsulas. The Garden Peninsula, the Nema Peninsula, and the Stonington Peninsula.
So which peninsula did you
So we
occupy?
were on the Garden Peninsula. It was the longest. It was 25 miles long and 4 miles wide, and there were 3 villages. 9 miles down was Garden, and then another 8 miles was Fayette, and at the tip of the peninsula was Fairport. And Fayette is now a state park. When I was growing up, it was a ghost town. At the turn of the 1900s into the 20th century, it was 500 or more people there. It was iron ore smelting. They would get pig iron and then ship it to Chicago. It was limestone, really, 100-foot limestone cliffs going into a snail shell harbor, and a lot of hardwood on the peninsula, which made it good for smelting the ore out of the rock. And they would just make pig iron strips. They didn't finish it off or anything. But when I was growing up, there was only one family living there. We used to go down there and play a lot, but everything was, kind of disintegrating. And then at some point, we used to have the blessing of the fleet there every summer, and the bishop would come down, and boats would come in from all over, even Navy ships, and small ones. And then at some point, it got sold to the state, and they rehabbed the buildings. And there's also a wonderful swimming beach and a campground and so on. So it's very nice.
So it's a tourist attraction.
Yeah, yes, right.
Amazing, yes.
Our village was never got much beyond 300, and it's less than that now. And it was mainly fisher people and woodworkers in the woods, woods workers when I was there. And then as time went on, a lot of the fish were depleted because of a lot of regulations and different things that were happening in the ecology. And so a lot of people have to go out of town for work. And our school was kind of old, you know, and so it was condemned by the time I got to 8th grade, so we had to be bused to Manistee to school. And they had a Catholic school, so I got 1 year of Catholic education. And then we went to the public school in Manistee also for a couple years. And then I always say we because Marlene and I always did stuff together. And we wanted to go to Catholic school. So west of our town, about 50 miles, was Escanaba. They had a Catholic school. So what we did, and other people did it too, you just put an ad in the paper saying that you would like to have a place to live in return for work. And so my junior and senior year, I was sort of a nanny and a housekeeper for some people over there.
In
and went to
Escanaba.
school. Yeah.
So that's how you got connected with our sisters?
No.
Oh,
Those
my.
sisters were Notre Dame sisters in that school. Actually, as a kid, sisters used to come in the summertime for 2 weeks, and they would teach catechism. We'd go to the public school for 3 hours in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we'd go for walks and different things like that with the sisters. But when I was in 6th grade, the pastor there knew the Dominicans. And so he made arrangements with Mother Gerald to have 3 of them come up. And they lived in our town in a little house. And they took care of 10 parishes. So there were 3 of them. And one gave music lessons, and they taught catechism, and they helped out at the parish. But then they went to 10 different places. That was in, must have been 48 or something like that.
Amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, and a couple years later, a woman had given money to rehab a building in town. She had given the money to the diocese, and they made a retreat center. So the sisters had half of the 2nd floor as their convent. So it was sort of a new place then for them to live, you know.
Well, what an experience.
Yeah.
You mentioned Marlene, your sister. Were there any other siblings?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I had a brother 3 years younger. We called him Buzzy. His name was Charles, after my grandfather. A sister 8 years younger, Katie. Another brother 10 years younger, Denny. And my youngest sister is Colleen, and she's 15 years younger. And now Marlene entered Adrian with me in 1954.
At the
September of 54.
same
we came,
time?
Came the same date.
Now, we haven't established it, that you were identical twins.
Right, yes, we were.
And
so
you just switched names once you entered, is that correct?
that was a surprise, yes. We didn't think it would happen, but some of the names, you could hand Mother Gerald 3 names, and then as a novice, she would give you one of them. And I can't remember if somebody suggested that we try it and just see what would happen. So we did, and yes, you never know till you're kneeling there and she says your name will be, and that's how it happened. And most of the folks in the novitiate were just calling us twin anyway, or because they didn't know who was who. So anyway, but when we entered, my brother Buzzy was going into high school, and so he entered the seminary at the same time. He went to Mount Calvary in Wisconsin, but the end of his sophomore year, he was killed there in a sporting accident.
Oh,
so
my heart. Oof.
yeah, so
That was hard on the family,
it
wasn't
was
it?
it was very hard. It was a complete surprise, not something that you would expect,
What was your father's occupation?
Well, Dad and Mom didn't get married till they were like 27 or so, because that was the aftermath of the crash. And he and his brother were fishermen for a few years. They lifted nets, and then they bought a little station, a gas station, and ice cream parlor, and ran that. But by the time he got married, they realized that that wouldn't support 2 families. His brother was older and already married. So he started doing other things. He was a very good mechanic and worked with my uncle. He could like take anything apart and put it back together again. And then he worked on the ore docks during that was very important when the war started.
Yes.
In 41. So he would go to Escanaba and work on the ore docks. And then I think it probably was when I was around 4th grade, we got our own house.
Mm-hmm.
We had a little 4-room log cabin, and it had a big shed behind it, and he started doing carpentry work. And he was an excellent woodworker. He would build houses from scratch, do everything, the masonry, the plumbing, the electric work. He drew up the plans just in his little scratch paper and so on. But he also, built furniture and made all kinds of, everything that went into the house he could make too. So,
I bet your brothers and sisters developed a work ethic like no one else.
well, we did, yeah.
Yes.
Well, my sister and I started helping people clean house when we were in 4th grade. You get paid for it. And then in 8th grade, we started a regular job at the retreat house. So we worked there every weekend, Monday night through Sunday afternoon. And did that up until we entered, My mother had been a teacher before she got married, and 1 year when we were growing up, she taught, but with 6 children, you didn't do a lot of that.
It was a major endeavor right there.
That's right, yes.
Who was your sponsor or helped you and your sister prepare?
Well, we didn't really talk about sponsors at that point in time, but the sisters that were there were Sister Me Barbara and I can't remember who the other two, they changed off, but she was there for sure. Mm-hmm. And we had a few others. The ones that first came in the summer before they started staying there were Sister Grace Genevieve, Sister Mary, and Sister Rose Ursula, I think.
Short.
I remember those because they were the first ones. Mm-hmm. But
and to see the white habit too.
Yeah, yes, it was very good because the other sisters that we had the last 2 years of school had the black habits, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Marilyn, what has brought you the most joy during your life as an Adrian Dominican?
It's hard to say because there are a lot of things that were very good. I was thinking it over before coming in, and it's been a very blessed journey in the sense of all of the opportunities and the experiences that I've been able to take advantage of. But I would say, the last probably 45 years when I was involved in diocesan work and worship, liturgy, and so on, being able to work in a collaborative manner with the different offices was really fine, and especially in 2 of the dioceses where we had refugee resettlement programs. I've always thought worship and social justice interface. And that was true in the early days of the liturgical movement in the United States. The big celebrations they had were always, in the conferences, were liturgy and social justice together. And in those 2 dioceses, Green Bay and Richmond, the bishops were very much at the forefront of Vatican II and so on. And so there was a very good interface there. And to kind of get me out of the institutional church setting, more or less, as a relaxation, I would help with refugee resettlement, and so worked with the Hmong people, and not resettling them, but just helping out in different things in Green Bay.
I didn't get the word.
Hmong, H-M-O-N-G.
In what area, what geographical area was that?
Oh, they were from Cambodia. They had helped our soldiers in Vietnam, and then we left, and they were terribly devastated, annihilated, killed, and And so it was very important that the government started letting them come in. They were hill people. They didn't have a written language till like 15, 20 years before they came to the States. So many of them, had no idea of reading or writing, much less translating things. So it was very, very interesting. But we were able to, in the Green Bay Diocese, we had some very good leaders in the Hmong community, and we worked with them on marriage prep and RCIA and that kind of thing. It was wonderful.
Amazing.
But the main ones that I worked with in both dioceses were Vietnamese, though, and I was on committees and chaired committees to resettle them.
Are you watching Ken Burns right now? His documentary on Vietnam.
I don't have a TV.
Oh, you don't have a TV by choice?
By choice.
A choice. Mhm.
Choice, yes.
When did you make that decision?
Well, I haven't had one since I moved here in 2011. I did not have one all the years that I was in Lafayette, which was 5.
Lafayette, where?
Indiana,
Indiana.
in that diocese. And then off and on, I've gone for a few months or a half year or so without buying one when I moved to a new place. But, I just, I know that I missed some good things on there, but there's just so much that's not worth paying for. Excuse me, but that's,
Well,
yeah.
that's your
Yeah.
choice.
Yes, right.
And that, to me, that feels like a contemplative choice.
It is. It's very good. I get my news from NPR, and so the radio's on, like 7 o'clock in the morning, and then it goes off after breakfast, and it goes back on again at 5 o'clock.
So you treasure your quiet time, don't you?
Yes. When I'm home, I have quiet, and I'm not home a whole lot, but that's,
Well, you mentioned the Lafayette Diocese. Were you not in Montana?
Oh, yes. I started diocesan work in '74, just part-time in Des Moines for a year, and then Denver and Winona, Minnesota, and because I had gotten a scholarship to go to Catholic U when we sold our House of Studies there, and so I got a degree in liturgy, and it was just after Vatican II had closed a few years, and there weren't too many dioceses that had liturgy offices. So I did work in offices of religious ed for a few years before I got to Green Bay in '76, and they had a worship office. And so I was there for 9 years in worship, and then Richmond, Virginia, and then Lafayette. And then I had 6 years off to go to Raleigh and be chapter prioress for Mid-Atlantic.
When you say Raleigh, is that where the headquarters were?
Yes. Mid-Atlantic didn't have an official office as such. We usually, all of the chapter prioress worked out of their home. And so because I was living in Lafayette when I was elected, I kind of looked at different places there to see which one would be good driving distance to a lot of our people and also have a good airport. And so I moved to Raleigh, and 3 of our sisters were there. Mary Ann Ennis, Mary Pat Dewey, and Kitty doing the preaching house. And then the next year, a tractor moved in and to do her immigration work. And so there were 5 of us there during the years that I was there, which was nice, And then from there, I went to Montana for 6 years, right?
As chapter prioress, what are some of the highlights that you cherish and keep in your heart?
Well, most of what I really appreciated was being the collaborative manner in which we. Our chapter was, I think, the youngest average age. People were very active. It was small. We had about 70 sisters and then a number of associates, but they were all involved at that point in time. And I think I was thinking of it the other day. I think 3 of them were involved in education, 1 in a school and 2 as college presidents. Everybody else was in a different kind of ministry. So when we got together, it was just amazing, the kinds of exchange and insights and thoughts and projects that we had. And the first year, I went into office on July 1st, and we had our chapter assembly in October. And I had just, I had met a few months before that Mary Beth Bears, and we talked a lot about open spaces. And so she came, and our first assembly was open spaces, and then after that, every assembly was open spaces.
For our listeners, maybe explain open spaces.
It means that you didn't go in there with a pre-planned program with speakers or anything. It was a place where the process was explained, and after our general address by the prioress and our prayer and our State of the Union, that kind of thing, then what would happen is you just had time to think about any topic that you would like to address with somebody, talk about, and maybe come up with an action or something. Mm-hmm. And so that place was so exciting, because I just remember that when she said, okay, time for you whoever has an idea, come up and get a piece of paper, a marker, and start writing out what your topic is, and then post it. And people who want to go to your topic will sign up. We'll assign rooms, and then you go. Well, I mean, the people that hit the floor at that time with their pieces of paper were something else, because they were writing on the floor. There wasn't any place to write.
Oh, my.
And we came out of the open space that fall with 16 different proposals. And people were, you'd back them up. They were so excited. Mm-hmm. And we did a lot those next years.
You continued with that process.
Continued with that every year. That was our process. Mm-hmm. And people just always came up with different things that were going on. I said 16 proposals. That's not right. I can't remember exactly how many. I think there were about a dozen. But we had 16 grant proposals that came out of that afterward.
My.
So, yeah.
And that would go to the Leadership Council?
Yes. And then there was a committee that decided if they would get a grant. But the people in the chapter were so committed to whatever it was that was surfacing as needs in the area or in the world. And that's what open spaces allowed you to do. Mm-hmm. You were able to surface what you came with as a very important concern for ministry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I bet it was difficult to leave that group, was it not?
It was very difficult to leave that group, yes, but I was able to go back into liturgy work, which was really the love of my life. And in that work, I was able to do a lot, too, because I was on the National Board of Directors in the 70s and early 80s, and so got involved in a number of things, and then always stayed as a member of the organization, which was Diocesan Liturgical Commission, so you would get the director of worship from each diocese, mm-hmm. and if they could afford it, they would send other members of their team if they had a team. And then I was on a committee for 6 or 7 years to write the first children's lectionary. And Sister Suzanne Hofweber was on that committee also.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so that was when I got to know her, and she was just a wonderful, wonderful person. I don't think most of us appreciated what her involvement was, especially with the Spanish-speaking bishops after the Vatican Council.
Vatican II, yes.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of opportunity that way.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the other thing, when I was chapter prioress, of course, belonged to LCWR. And because of where I lived, I decided that instead of belonging to that region, I would do the one where some of our sisters were in Region 2. So I went to LCWR Region 2, and in order to be in contact with the southern people, I became a part of Dominican Council of the South. And so I had the opportunity to really work with two different groups on the East Coast, North and South, which was great. And one of the things we were able to do in Region 2, I was on the executive committee for that region, and we met twice a year. And one year we decided we would meet for 3 days to do human trafficking, and that was back in the year about 2000 or so. And we had speakers and so on, and we invited Sister Marilyn Winter from USCCB Migration Office to come and be with us, because we knew that office took care of refugees and migrants, and also would handle trafficking. And we wrote letters then to Colin Powell, because he was in the State Department, and different people. Anyway, she was so impressed with what Region 2 was doing that she went back and she told the bishops about it, and they put together a conference the following year, and 50 of us were invited, all expenses paid, and that was either 2001 or 2. And
amazing.
It was, then they really got on board, and they've done some good work since then too.
That is quite amazing.
Quite amazing.
Yes.
Well, the other thing, when I was in Richmond, Bishop Sullivan, of course, is known as the Peace and Justice Bishop, and he was president of Pax Christi for 5-6 years. But anyway, when we were there, we had a very strong, in fact, we had 3 offices of justice and peace, the main one in Richmond, and then we had one in Tidewater and one out in Appalachia. And we went with him. There were about 16 of us that went on a study trip, an exchange trip to Russia one year. And the following year, a Russian family came over, and I belonged to a peace community at that point, and we met every month. And one of the professors from the Virginia Commonwealth University came and asked if we could find housing for a student that was coming over on a fellowship, because he had a wife and a child, and his scholarship wouldn't pay for a wife and children. So it just so happened that the sister that was living with me moved out. And so I asked, Pat Seaman at that time was the chapter prioress, and she said, okay. And so I invited them to come, sight unseen. They were bringing a 13-month-old baby girl, and lived with me for a year. It was just wonderful. Yeah.
What a gift you gave them.
Yeah.
My. Going back to the Mid-Atlantic chapter, Marilyn, who was the first chapter prioress?
Ellen Robertson.
And then
it was Pat Seaman, Catherine Clyett, myself, Mary Beth Bears, and Mary Prininsky. And when Pat Seaman was there, she was there for only 4 years, because then she was voted on to the General Council. And so that's when Catherine Clyett went and took, and so we kind of got out of order of the elections, but it worked out fine. And in fact, the only death I had while I was the 6 years was Ellen Robertson, our first chapter prioress.
Oh my!
Yes.
That was a gift to
She was a
walk
wonderful
with her.
person. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, she was very justice-minded. Had a school in South Carolina for unwed mothers and people who were in poverty. It was wonderful work.
Marilyn, as we end our interview, thank you so much. This has been so interesting.
Yeah.
If you were setting a table for 4 at your living space right now, and look back through your life, those you've read about, those you've met, those you've worked with, who among living or deceased, what 3 people would you want at that table to break bread with you?
Well, that's a difficult question to pare it down to 3 people. But I probably would like to meet and talk with Pope Francis, also the Dalai Lama, and maybe Chief Seattle. Yeah. I've been very much involved with the Native American community for the last dozen years, and bringing my Native heritage to the fore and working with the Cattery. And that wasn't I was able to go to the canonization of St. Cattery, and I actually carried a candle next to her, what do you call them?
Her remains.
Yes, they were in a glass case, but I was carrying a candle alongside of it, and in the procession, as we came up the steps to St. Peter's and placed it on a table right next to the altar and so on. So that was very, very meaningful to be able to do that.
Well, I'm sure you'd have a wonderful conversation with the three people at your table.
Yeah.
And we have had a wonderful conversation, Marilyn. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're
and
welcome.
Blessings to your twin sister, and gratitude for all her years. She was with us 20 years.
20 years, that's right.
Yes.
Yes. Very, very important 20 years in her life.
Yes. Amen.
Very good. Thank you.
God bless.